From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. Let's check in briefly with the breaking news on Capitol Hill. The House is voting as we tape this on a new potential Republican Speaker of the House. The Republican nominee is Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan. And let's give a little flavor of the debate on the floor there. Here is Elise Stefanik nominating Jordan for Speaker.
Jim is the voice of the American people who have felt voiceless for far too long. Whether as Judiciary Chair, conservative leader, or representative for his constituents in West Central Ohio, whether on the wrestling mat or in the committee room, Jim Jordan is strategic, scrappy, tough, and principled. He is a mentor, a worker, and above all, he is a fighter. And the American people know, we know, that Jim Jordan is a winner on behalf of the American people.
And here from the other side of the aisle is Democrat Pete Aguilar nominating their leader, Hakeem Jeffries.
There is still a path forward for both Democrats and Republicans to come together to elect a speaker who can unite us behind a common purpose, keeping the government open on a bipartisan compromise that won more than 300 votes just 4 months ago in this chamber, taking up an up or down vote on help so Israel can defeat Hamas and Ukraine can defeat Putin, and reassuring the American people that their legislators have their backs. It's that simple, Mr. Speaker, and we can do it today. Let's work together. Let's elect a speaker who will reach out, a hand of bipartisanship, and deliver for the American people. That is why, once again, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, I'm proud to nominate Hakeem Jeffries for Speaker and yield back.
Kim, we're watching the C-SPAN video feed of this as we speak, and so things can always change. They vote in alphabetical order, and I see they're up to Porter. But it looks like on my screen that Jordan has already lost 13 Republicans, a few votes for Kevin McCarthy, a few votes for Steve Scalise, a few votes for others. So that could change. People can always change their votes before it closes. But Kim, what do you expect from here? And what does it say if Jim Jordan can't lock this up on the first ballot?
Yeah, I think more importantly than whether or not anything changes in this first vote is if something changes in a second or third vote. Because here's what's going on. If you listen to the people who had signaled already that they were going to vote no on Jim Jordan, at least on the first ballot, or people who have been withholding their judgment until the very end, it's very interesting. It's not necessarily about Jim Jordan. Most people say that they quite like him, that they think he would probably do an okay job. You don't have folks dug in the way that some on the right were dug in against Kevin McCarthy back in January and that speaker's vote. What you have happening here are a lot of people working through a lot of the anger that they had over how this all played out. They're still very, very frustrated that Matt Gaetz and this group of rebels basically ousted Kevin McCarthy. They are equally angry that they then obstructed any possibility of Steve Scalise, who has been a favorite of many in the party for a long time, of his ability to win the speakership. And so the first vote for Jim Jordan, you should view many of those who are voting, if they vote no, as protest votes. That's one thing that's going on. Here's the second thing. There are a number of Republicans who are in Biden districts, meaning districts that Joe Biden won in the last election. So they are not solidly conservative districts by any means. And they are a little wary about embracing wholeheartedly a guy who certainly comes more from the right wing of the Republican Party. So remember, all politics is local. You should view some of these votes as well, too, as these people going on the record for their own constituents, at least initially, as saying, we're not going to vote for Jim. I didn't vote for Jim Jordan. He wasn't my first choice. This is not where I wanted things to go. That all changes, I think, the dynamic in a second vote or a third vote. Now, I could be wrong on that. Maybe these people are dug in. Maybe there's no way they're going to come around. But there's probably a case to be made that if they have another vote later today, or even if this goes in tomorrow, that he's going to start to whittle away at those no votes, because Quite aside from the fact that there aren't many people who really have like substantive issues with the Jim Jordan. The conference seems to understand that 2 weeks on from this mess, that they really do need to get themselves back in order, especially with everything going on in Israel and the Middle East. They can't have the House in disarray. So I think that he's got as good a shot as any to come out of this as Speaker of the House.
And worth saying that he already seems to have whittled away many of those no votes. The vote for others as we speak is now up to 14 from 13. So another for Steve Scalise there. But the tally last week, Bill, that I saw of the internal Republican conference was that there were about 55 Republicans who were saying that they would not vote for Jim Jordan on the floor. Up to 15 for others there. So another defection from the Jordan wing. But it is interesting now that we've seen some of those people who were skeptical having been won over to the Jordan line, including some of these defense hawks who seem to think that they have been given assurances by Jim Jordan that some Ukraine aid might be able to pass or will at least get a floor vote under a Speaker Jordan. And so that's the other thing I'm watching to see on this first ballot, Bill, is if the number last Friday was 55 no's, how many has he been able to convert over this weekend as he's been making calls and trying to convince these no votes to come on board?
Yeah, I think we won't know until the second vote. As Kim says, a lot of these people, for the record, want to show, well, Jim Jordan wasn't my first choice, but he might be acceptable as a second choice. Look, I think the other thing that has occurred since McCarthy was toppled is a sense in the Republican Party. I don't want to say that it doesn't matter who's Speaker, but that it's more important now to have a leader than a specific leader. In other words, it's been bad for the Republican Party, this chaos and everything. With the war in Gaza, there's a lot going on. We need a speaker. And I have the sense that things are coalescing around Jim Jordan. But again, we won't know that until after this first vote is taken. And we see if there are really 5 hardliners that are going to never go for him. And also, that would leave a problem. After McCarthy was toppled, the Freedom Caucus might like Jim Jordan. I don't know who they would pick. Now they've rejected Scalise. And if they reject Jordan, I don't know who would step into that breach. And I don't know who would be more acceptable to the people then. So they have a real problem if at the end of the day, Jim Jordan is not elected Speaker.
Kim, we'll give you the last word, but to pick up where Bill left off, one of the ideas that I've heard floating around is acting Speaker Patrick McHenry could be given some sort of broader mandate to pass some legislation to get the House at least through this transitional period where they're casting a bat for a speaker, or it could be somebody from the broader Republican conference. There's about 220 House Republicans, and if Jordan goes down, I don't know who the answer is, but there's about 217 other people whose names haven't been tried yet on the floor.
Look, I mean, the scenario that I hear most likely that if Jordan were to go down is that there might be a call for McCarthy to try again. I think that would be very hard in that I don't necessarily think that those who ousted him in the first round are of a different view now, nor do I think that they're particularly chastened by what's happened. So I think you end up with the same old problem, whether it's with him or with Scalise. But that is a problem with a number of the names that are out there, Kyle, whether it's McHenry or others, that there's this solid block of conservatives, or if that's even the word you would use for them. I would put them in a different category. They're kind of grandstanders and who have huge amounts of sway over what happens if they choose to exercise it. And they remain adamantly opposed to anyone that they think is not from the more conservative wing of the party. I think it's a real pity that they are flexing their muscles and basically using their very tiny minority to roll the entire rest of their party and to embroil their party in such a drama. But that dynamic is not changing. And that's why I also find it, is it possible that the more moderate faction of the Republican Party could decide to sort of strike back and do some sort of deal with Democrats for a joint speakership? Maybe, but they would become almost as reviled in the party as some of those grandstanding on the other side. So it seems more likely that maybe the party does try to find some kind of consensus candidate like a Jordan, at least someone everyone can live with, and move ahead from there.
Well, stay tuned. We'll be back tomorrow with more on Speaker Jordan, or maybe not.